better manage our time and our time together. First, we enjoin everyone to please wear your IDs. That's for security reasons as well as for identification purposes. We also request everyone to please switch off our mobile phones or at least keep them on silent mode. And this is more for the speakers. We will do away with the introduction of our speakers. Their profiles are included in the program, which are in your kits. And to adhere to our program schedule, we have previously agreed that the speakers will be given 20 minutes for their presentations to give us more time for questions later. And to help keep us within the time limit, we'll ask our remain. We will flash a cue card signaling that you have 5 minutes to wind up your presentation. Another cue card will be flashed, signaling the end of the time allotted for your presentation. We will have an open forum before the end of the session. Should you prefer to write your questions, question slips are available in your conference kit. Members of the Secretariat are on hand to receive your written questions. The order of presentations will be the order in which they are seated. The first to speak will be Ms. Maritha Eckhart. The second will be Judge William Nuff. And the third will be Judge Jasbandar Kaur. And I am the half. They're given 20 minutes, I have 7 minutes to wind up and give a short input. Okay, may I now call on Rita?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Very good. So this session is about communication skills and working with the media. And I think we all can agree that what we make and what the reason that we are here and the way that we talk is through our decisions. The decisions is what we do, that is our products, that is who we are, and that is what we speak through. So on that sort of foundation basis, we can ask ourselves, is that enough? And we can ask ourselves, do we write them in the way that people can understand them? And we could also ask ourselves, who are actually the target group of our decisions? Now, obviously, the parties involved in the case is one of the target groups, but maybe there's an outer circle around that specific focus group, which could be the public. Because we also, all of us, work through transparency. Transparency is underlying everything that we do. And so, how many people do we actually think reads our decisions? How many of the ordinary citizens would go into our websites and read our decisions? That is provided, of course, that we put our judgments and decisions on the website. And I can maybe assure you that very, very few will. So very few of the ordinary people would read our judgments. Now, how many of the people would read about our decisions? Hands up, is it less than half of the population maybe? Hands up, yeah. The people who believe that it's more than half of the population, hands up.
I think it depends.
It depends.
On the case that you are advocating or.
That is a very, very good point, because no one reads all our cases, obviously, but there are some cases that seems to have more attraction than other cases. And of those cases that are the most spectacular, what do we do actually to help and abet that someone can talk to the ordinary people about those cases? And this is what this session is about. So I'm sure that some of you have already contemplated and have various systems in place in order to aid and abet the people that we are dependent upon. And who are they? The people that we are very, very dependent on to write about our decisions. Who is it that write about our decisions? When we publish it maybe on our website?
Press.
Yes. Who said that? Good. The press. So we are completely dependent on the press. In Denmark, we say they are sometimes the fourth of the powers. So we call them the fourth power. And that's, among other things, for that reason. Because we are dependent that they want to actually cover the cases that we have rendered decisions in. Like I said, I'm sure many of you have already many things in place for the journalists. And I could ask you, how many of you have press officers working at your courts? Please, hands up. Thank you. So that is about half of the people in this room have actually already press officers in place in their courts, helping and abetting. Now, how many have specific judges who has that task of being assigned to work with the media? Hands up. A little less, but there are actually courts in this room who have already decided that it should be both the press officers who could be judges or who could not, and judges who should work with the media and help facilitate that this connection can exist. So that there is a facilitating aspect of this, and there's also a question of who actually works with facilitating for the press. I would also argue that there is also a physical aspect of this. So there would be maybe room for maneuvering when you choose the chair, the room that the specific case of interest should be conducted in. The smaller the room, the less people it could provide, isn't it? So the bigger the room, the bigger amount of people it could supply. Thus, the more chance that there is that people actually could come in and listen to the hearing and report afterwards. So there are many things that that you can do to help, and I'm sure that many of you do a lot of things already. I'm going to tell you a little story about a case of rape. And it took place in Denmark, I think it's 3.5 years ago, but the case was conducted 3 years ago. And this is a story of a young girl, and she suffered from diabetes. So she had to take her insulin. Thank you. On a regular basis. And she, either she forgot, or she didn't bring it, I don't know. But in any case, she had not taken that product that she needed, the medicine. And she went to a party, and she drank quite a lot. And there was, at the end, she had sex with 3 men. And the question was this a rape or not? And from a judicial point of view, from the judge point of view, it actually had no, it wasn't a significant case. So it wasn't a big, legally difficult case. But what happened was that when the case came out, the decision was made, everyone went ballistic in Denmark. It was an acquittal, and the press went ballistic. They wrote about it everywhere. The social media was frenzied. They even wrote about it everywhere. The politicians, they were also pretty upset. So they asked questions. How could this be? As to how, haven't you seen the famous English video on with the tea? So the legal question was, did they have intent? But the people's question was, how could this ever happen to a girl who did not have her medication and who was completely vulnerable and who had been drinking a lot? I mean, how could you even think that she could have given consent? So it's 2 sort of different perspectives on this story. I want to use that story, and I want you to have it in the back of your mind when we discuss the objectives with the session. Because the first rule for journalists is speed. They need to come very, very fast out with something. The first rule of judges is accuracy, isn't it? So how can we reconcile those different values? Given the fact that we agreed before that we actually also depend on the journalists. We cannot live without them if we want to have transparency in our decisions. There's another factor. Social media has created a pressure for motions, but judges work with facts and consistency. And the third one, obviously, should judges build new skills, and could they reach out to the public more than they do today, and if so, how? So those are the three questions I want to have to give a little bit of consideration about for the next 15 minutes or something. Let us not forget about the story about the girl and the three guys, but let me just give you a little bit more background, because I have something I want to share with you, and then I will return to the story. This is a survey done in Europe within the organization called ENCJ. And I don't want you to read this, I just wanted to show you for the merits that there is such a study. So I want to read this out for you, because this was some of the major, in respect to this session, the major conclusions. What the judges said about themselves in Europe, the European judges have scored, and they say that the impact from the media on the decision of the judges is large in most countries, and it's increasing. They also say the influence on social media is smaller than that of the traditional media, but it's increasing. And 34% of everyone who had actually filled out the thing, they feel that the judiciary is not respected by the traditional media. And that rises, we should think about that. We should think about that and how to deal with it. And that brings me to this point, that effective communication always requires you to know what your message is. You must know what your message is, or you can't deliver it properly. You also should be really careful to consider who your target group is. Who would be your target group? Now, considering that for us, the message would almost always be the outcome of the decision. Could be a little bit different things, but almost this would be the message. Then the audience or the target group could vary, couldn't they? Because one is the parties of the case and the attorney and all the professionals, but another group that we talked about was the media, and a third group was the public. So the audience is different. And the next thing is, of course, what media platforms do they use? The audience that you want to reach with your message, what platforms are they on? And the last one, in which situation do they need that information, or are they in need of the information? So you can discuss with yourself internally what your message is. And like I said, for us in Denmark, we have a goal that we want to have told about the court's adjudication. So we have an expectations to our judges that they should tell about the court adjudications. We should also ensure that it's understandable, and I think for the people who I had the pleasure of talking to yesterday, I already showed this, that when you write, you should write in Denmark and in a Danish context, and it could very well be another number in your language. In the Danish context, everything shows that if you write between 15 and 18 words in one sentence before you make a punctuation, most people will actually understand what you say. If you write less, even more will, but maybe it's not as easy to get the details with you. And if you have more, a substantial amount of the Danes will not be able to follow you. So that's a very, very good practical trial, isn't it? I will give you another example. Since we are so dependent on the press, and since we are so dependent on the journalists, we could ask ourselves, should we actually train them? I mean, one thing is that we train our judges, or some of our judges, but should we actually also train them, since we are so dependent on them? Just like in every other case, we would train the trainer, wouldn't we? But did we ever pause and consider, should we train the journalists? And if so, how could we even do it? And in Denmark, we asked ourselves this question, and we decided we're not going to train them because we don't know who they are. They are going to shift all the time, but what we will do is we will make it easier for them to actually know their rights and their obligations. And so we set out to do this little pamphlet, and it was, in the beginning, we made it into a little booklet. And it's 70 pages long, and it describes how the system works and everything. And what we did was we forwarded it to 20 journalists, and we asked them, would you like this product? Is there something missing here? Are there questions that you often ponder that you didn't get an answer to in this booklet? And they went back and said, no, the content is fine, but how would you ever dream of making it into a booklet? Because we never would need this as a booklet. We would always need it when we actually sit in court. And when we sit in court, we can't be bothered to bring a book and to do it. So we need it in a virtual form. And we were so glad that we actually posed that question, because after that we postponed the outcome of the book for 6 months, and we made a website and we put it on the website instead. So the booklet is still out there, but it's become sort of the marketing material, or whatever you want to call it, for the real product. And the real product is actually the website. And in there you can ask your question and it comes up. And we hope that we have enabled the journalist better to cover our cases, since we're so dependent upon them. We could also ask ourselves, sometimes, do we proactively have something that we want to tell and share the public about? And in this picture you see there are 4 pictures, and it's 4 different TV programs in Denmark. And the one on the left side, number sort of 1 and 4, if you sort of read it, it's this was a proactive thing from us to production companies, or TV production companies, where we said, well, how would you like to make a reporting series about the bailiff's court? Because we would actually like that. And that's a very advanced step for us. Maybe you did it, and it would be very interesting to hear about it. But it was a very advanced step for us. We had never done that before. And it required, obviously, loads of talks and agreements and details, and when could you stop and not stop. And there were tons of issues that were difficult, but there was also the outcome that with, was this 6 episodes that a fifth of the Danish population actually saw, because you can measure that in Denmark. And they know now how the bailiff works. And that is actually quite nice. So that's sort of the proactive way of doing it. Comes with a lot of difficulties, but it's a way of doing it. Other way of doing it is when they want to make something. That's the usual way. They want to make something, it's usually the sensational stuff or the difficult stuff, where you don't really want to step forward. But where you have to step forward. And you have to be sure to lay down your ground rules, train the judge in what he could say, how could he help, and how could he avoid too much damage from taking place. So that's the ordinary broadcasting companies. There's always also obviously the chance that you could put stuff on the YouTube. And we actually do that in Denmark. So when we have something that we want to share with the public, we could put it on the YouTube channel, and we do. I know that there are several of you who do other spectacular things, or for us as Danes, new things. I talked to some Israeli people who told me there was a radio program. That was a very interesting feature. I spoke to some Dutch people who told me that they have podcasts. They make podcasts. And I spoke to Norwegian people, and they told me they were contemplating making video judges, so that the judges could tell to the video, explain about a specific case. So there are many, many other ways that you could contemplate dealing with the press, enabling them to do better, or having your own facts out in another way that you usually do. On social media, emotions dominate, and I have here a picture of His Honorable Frank Caprio. He's American, and he has a whole show, and I can see from the notes that you know him. I think this is an example. This could not happen in Denmark, but he is actually a very good example of how he has found a good way to work within the context of the social media, because he has integrity. It's not, when you see his shows, at least I find, it's not that he is sincere in what he does, but he does it on the premises of those particular platforms that he operates in, which in his case are the social media. Now I'm wondering how the Danish approach to that media platform could be, and I cannot tell you the answer because I think it's very difficult, but he's an example of what he has thought about that. Because the point that I want to make in this connection is that Facebook and Twitter has a rising part of the traffic, and they make their economy out of the shares. So how many is on Facebook? Some. I think also, maybe it's called WhatsApp in the Asian countries. Yeah. So anyway, either of them, you know that if you like something, you give it a little like it and thumbs up thing, and that's what they live off. That's their whole economic is based on how many likes they get. And why do I bother to tell you this? I bother to tell you this because when you write something, if you want to have it widespread, you want to write it so it gets the thumbs up. And what does that do to the way that you write your story? You tell the spectacular things, don't you? Because facts doesn't tend to get a thumbs up. Oh, we had 200 cases. Fantastic, I'm going to give it a thumbs up. So it does something to the way that you work with the story and the way that you present it. And hence my question, how do you actually accommodate those? Twitter is reality in 140 characters, and Facebook is driven by emotions. So in our case, we ask ourselves, what's the kind of story that could explode? And I think one very good explanation on why it's likely, it's never given, why it's likely that it explodes, is that it invokes feelings and it's about an identifiable topic. And this is where I want to return to the young girl. Remember her from the outset. This was exactly her type of case. We could all identify. We could all identify with her having drinking too much, not had her medicine. Did she really want to do this or not? We could actually, most of us, if we heard, I know but if you didn't bring all the sensational stuff into it, I would bet that you could also identify with the three guys in there, if you heard the circumstances. So this was the type of story that just attracted this attention. And what could have judged? Could he have done anything to have it less risky? And the thing is, that he actually could. He could have done something. Maybe he could not have avoided it, but he could have done something to help it. Because in Denmark, it's a two-step thing. First, you discuss whether he is guilty or not, and then after that, you discuss what the sentence should be. So it's a two-step thing. And what happened was, this was a very young judge, and actually he had just been to the office of Louise and me, and he had been sitting there doing administration work. So for him, within the first 2 weeks, he got this case, and he was therefore very inexperienced in handling and dealing with the press. So what he did, he thought, well, we've conducted this. I know now that this should be the question of guilty or not, and it's best for the parties if they get that decision as fast as possible. So he gave out there, and he gave the guilty reason, or the verdict, sorry. But he had not prepared the second half. So in that time span between the guilty sentence and the sentence, the media went ballistic, and it was unstoppable and it was uncontrollable. So what he could have done is he could have prepared, he could have finished the second part, and he could have prepared something for the press. And I'm sure he will do this for his entire judge career from now on, because this was not an easy case and it was not easy for him. And this you cannot make on the fly. This you cannot wait to do. It's like, could you imagine if you were in ambulance and they had to look for the heart thing to give you? No. You must have the ambulance completely packed up front. And it's the same with the court dockets. You must prepare the court dockets up front. You must have all the questions asked so it's easy to answer them and make sure that all the questions have been answered before you go out there, before you even, and in that respect, with the balance of who should you cater to, you should cater here also to the public, is my position. So you should not go out there only with the guilty verdict. You should wait until you actually have these facts and you can write them down and prepare them. So ask yourselves, is this an interesting case enough for the public? And ask yourselves, will they cover it? And ask yourselves, what will I do if they cover it as judge? What can I do? So my point is, you can do a lot for the press, thus helping the whole system in the judiciary. So you can actually be aware what media platform it is and act accordingly. You could train the judges in dealing with the media and be sure to find out how many of the judges you want to have dealing with the media. You could prepare a standard for court dockets, the one I just showed you before. You could make sure they're accessible within minutes after the passing of the judgments. And in reality, in Denmark at least, this means a maximum of 1 minute, because that's the time that they complete on. And you could consider copying the law text, and that's just to remind everyone that you are actually for facts, and you are actually representing something. Now, if you do that, this will, and I've put this in the purple thing, enable the message in the corresponding language I've written. It will make sure that the judges feel prepared and make the recitals faster and easier to read, the court dockets. It will enable the journalists to utilize these at the right time, and it will prevent flaws. And it will also finally contribute to enhance the knowledge of the law and the system. And I think we owe that to all of our systems that we work for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariti. We will have now William Knopf. Thank you.
All right. Hi, good afternoon. And I think dealing with the media and the public, it's an incredibly important topic. As judges, the media can wreak havoc to your career. And it's not a topic that's taught in law schools or seminars, none that I've ever been to before this one. And, as we say in Kentucky, where I'm from, it's hard to fight people that buy ink by the barrel. So you gotta be careful. All right, so I'm from the South, and in the South in America, we call Southern English. So I speak a little slow, so I'm not going to force myself to talk past everything in 20 minutes. Let me pop that cartoon up there if I can, sir. He's looking for it. Eric, coming up. He's looking for it. All right. Let's talk about first what the role of the media is in the courts. And as Marita kind of touched on, it's an incredibly important role. The media is basically the one that informs the public about the business of the courts. They're covering legal cases of important interest. And let's never forget as well that the media is the public watchdog of those in government, dealing with corruption, incompetency, waste, and inefficiency. Of course, sometimes too, if you can't read this, this is the lawyer and his client from the judge. He says, since you've already been convicted by the media, I imagine we can wrap this up pretty quickly. So that's something that happens too. That's another role of the media. But the media is not our enemy. And I think you got to always keep that in mind. Even if you get an article written about you or a case that you may not be real happy about, keep in mind that they have an important role in our democracy. So, what's the judicial interest in the media's role? Why do we care? We work hard to try to do justice, and the media can inform the judiciary about our good work and our proper use of our resources. The media can shape the public image of the courts, and was mentioned by Marita, much of what the public knows about the courts is through newspapers and television. And the courts need to assist the media in reporting accurately court news stories, and which in part, you got to build relationships. Get to know the reporter that covers the courthouse beat that you work with. Get on a first name basis. Take that person to lunch and talk to them. Another thing that the media can do is basically improve our public perception and develop better public understanding and hopefully better community respect. If it's shown that the judiciary is working hard, doing a good job, we're going to build up our respect. Now, one of the main issues that the media is really concerned about is access. If you talk to somebody in the media, that's one of the first words that they're gonna throw at you. Let me read a quote to you from a case in Kentucky that I think really summarizes this whole idea. The principle that justice cannot survive beyond the walls of silence is so deeply embedded in our Anglo-American judicial system as to give our people in today's modern society a deep distrust of secret trials. One of the strongest demands of a democratic system is the public should know what goes on in their courts. This demand can only be met by permitting them to present in person and by permitting the press, who have the facilities to properly inform them, to be present upon their behalf. Of course, that breaks down into two areas of law, basically criminal and civil cases. In the civil area, cases are presumed to be open to the public, but that presumption may be overcome in limited circumstances. Although civil court proceedings are presumed to be open for inspection to the public, they of course have limited authority to close proceedings and seal records. To close civil proceedings or seal records, a court must weigh the interest of the party seeking closure against the public's right to access of those proceedings. What should the media do if there's an objection to a closing? Typically, a reporter, either directed by his or herself or through an attorney, would make a motion to intervene in the court and when they ask for a hearing. Let me give you, if you remember nothing else, remember this. Don't ever close the proceedings or deny access to a court record without allowing a hearing. Give them a hearing, give them their day in court. And that means even if you got to take a short recess in a trial, do that, because that's important for the media to be able to do their job under constitutional system. During that hearing, this is a closure hearing, the court will balance the public's right to access against the party's reason for closure. When balancing those interests, the court must consider whether there are compelling reasons to close the proceedings and whether viable alternatives to closure exist. And of course, there should always be a right to an appeal from a losing party. A lot of times when I was on the Court of Appeals and the appellate court, we would hear those kind of proceedings all the time where trial courts are trying to close the media, keep them out of a hearing for some reason or another, and then we would hear those appeal. The closure test would be the party seeking closure must demonstrate the right or interest is sufficiently important to warrant closure, and that there's less restrictive alternatives to closure that would not be sufficient, or the right or interest will be protected by a closed proceeding or a sealed record. I'll give you an example of that. When I was a trial judge, I tried a racially charged case, and the jurors, it was a high publicity case, involved multiple racially motivated crimes, and the jurors were really, we have jury trials in the United States, and they were really scared to participate. They didn't want to go through the jury selection process in public for things that may or may not be said. And so I basically closed that portion of the trial, had a hearing, closed it to the media, but I assured the media that those proceedings were being recorded, and after the jury was selected, I would make that available to them. So, that's the kind of balancing that you have to do. Now, in criminal proceedings, the prosecution of crimes is always a government action rather than out of private parties, and is presumed to be open, but may be closed in limited circumstances. For example, a child witness in a sex offense case, or to protect an undercover police officer. Of course, in family court cases, typically termination of criminal rights and adoption cases are confidential as well. In the area of access to court records, I'm an advocate, a big advocate of audio-video recording in the courtrooms. Audio-video recording, talking about cameras and high-quality recordings, which are now digital recordings, was really initiated in Kentucky. We were really the first place in the world to use audio-video recording. That was developed by a company out of my hometown in Louisville. And the advantage of that is, whenever there's a hearing, there's a record that's made and can be immediately provided to the press or anyone. So we really provide a high level of access. All right, let's shift gears. How can the judiciary educate the public and the media? We talked about websites earlier. I guess, like Denmark, we did a Court Reporter's Handbook as well, which eventually did get on the website. I think Kentucky was a little slower getting computers than Denmark was, so we had the paper volume a little longer. But the reason for this is that we have a turnover of reporters. And you know, it is important to try to educate the reporters that are covering the reports, and without trying to reinvent the wheel every time. You know, we gave them a copy of this and say, here, look, here's some proceedings, here's the procedures, here's terms, and that's helpful. In regards to letting the public know about what the court's doing, you know, things like speaker bureaus, allowing judges or court administrators to go out and talk to high schools where there's time, giving courthouse tours. The use of public information officers is good to be a person that's kind of coordinating all these kind of efforts. Here's something that we did too, which I thought was really successful. We conducted joint bench media forums. And what we did was we selected a test market. You know, usually, when I say a media market, you understand what I'm saying, a certain area is being covered by certain newspapers and certain television markets. We got a committee together. You got to be representative of lawyers, judges, TV people, and newspaper people, and you get together and you got to develop an agenda. That's important because otherwise your forum will just turn into a beef session, you know, a bitch session where everybody's just complaining about, you know, the media's doing this to us and they're doing that, and the courts aren't give us enough access. So you got to get an agenda and bring people together. You know, it's always good to bring all the stakeholders together and talk about common issues. We did several of those and they were really successful. Another thing is too, you know, everybody likes a prize, right? You know, it's not done every year, but as appropriate, we give an award for outstanding journalism. It's presented by the bench and the bar, and where we feel like there's either print or television, somebody that does a really good job in covering the courts, we give an award. It's a prestigious thing. It's something that the reporters are happy to get. And like, for example, I handled a big case involving a woman that died from a misdiagnosis of breast cancer. And this reporter did a whole study of cases in the Kentucky courts and involving that issue and how those cases were being handled by the court system. And it was a really moving, compelling story and really brought attention to the work the courts were doing to quickly process those type cases. So, all right, educating the judiciary about the media. It's important that the courts understand the various needs of the media. Whether it's television, radio, or newspaper. In the area of judicial ethical issues, you know, that's always in consideration. Always making sure that you're not making public comments by either a judge or staff that might affect cases outcome or impair its fairness. I understood from people raising their hands earlier that usually there's certain people in your court system that might be designated as a spokesperson. That's a good thing. Most judges in the United States are elected, and they are elected in our state. And so usually the lawyers, if the judge, if there's a way they can get some good publicity, you know, they want to be on TV, they want to be quoted, but you got to be careful when you do that. Of course, generally, you know, it's always allowable as a judge to speak off the record or on background about, you know, maybe the status of the case and when certain hearings are going to be held. Basically, talking to the media about things are really in the public record to try to be helpful in that regards. Of course, you never want to be talking about anything that's confidential or your decision-making process or anything of that nature. How many of y'all had a high-profile case before, where there's been a lot of media interest, televisions, newspapers, everybody's in your courtroom? Well, that's all going to come to you at one point in time. Everybody in their career has a high publicity case, and you gotta be ready for that. There's a lot of different things you can do. You know, limit the number of cameras, usually to one. Maybe allow a feed of the one camera into maybe a dedicated media room for that case, where all the media can go in one room and watch what's going on. That's a good way to handle that problem. In regards to unfair, incorrect media coverage, there's several different points on that. Factual errors, if you have a case and you've been really misquoted, or the opinion's been misconstrued, or there's just something totally correct, you can always seek a retraction on that. If there's just a quotation error, you gotta decide, is that really serious or important enough to even raise an issue? Sometimes you gotta be thick-skinned as a judge and let some things slide. In the area of newspaper editorials, sometimes judges will get attacked, from a decision they made or the way things are being handled. Judges are vulnerable in that degree. We're not like the governor, or the president, or legislators that got press people and can be real forthcoming about what they're doing. But in order to defend yourself, and sometimes you got to defend yourself. I've seen some judges that I've just watched just get beat up unfairly, and nothing's being done to defend them. So if you're going to be like an editorial's written against something that you did, it's always best to let other people speak for you. In other words, maybe get a bar leader or maybe a retired judge or something like that to write a letter to the editor saying, hey, listen, this isn't right what you're saying. All right. From my years of trial and appellate judge, I've learned a few tips about dealing with the media. There's 17 of them. I think I have enough time to kind of run through these quickly. Only properly authorized personnel should speak to the media regarding specific cases. We talked about that. Always consider whether you're on the record, which means your comments can be attributed to you and quoted by the media. If you only want to go in background, make it clear that this is background or we're off the record. Those are terms of art. Everybody's heard those, right? On the record, off the record, background. That's critical. Every time I've ever spoke to a reporter in my life, I always make that clear. Hey, this is off the record, or this is just background, or I'll talk to you. This is what I'm telling you, or on the record. Avoid saying no comment. That looks bad, especially. It looks bad and sounds bad. If you can't release information, explain why. Explain, articulate to the reporter why it is that you can't do that. You don't want to appear evasive or defensive. Always be open and honest. Candor, transparency are important. You can diffuse situations by admitting that a process did not work, or there was an error, but that your office is working on a remedy for a matter. I remember we had a situation where an important file got lost, and instead of saying, oh well, it really hadn't been lost, we think we know where it is. We basically released a statement that we handle thousands of cases every year. This particular file was lost, but we've implemented new procedures to make sure that this kind of thing that didn't happen again. It's best to be open and forthright. When you deal with the media, especially if you're going to be on television or radio, don't try to be funny or make offhanded jokes. If you're not a comedian, it's never going to really come across right. If a reporter calls and wants to interview by phone and you need time to prepare, thank that person for calling and ask them if you can call back within the reporter's deadline, and that way you can try to find out what does the reporter want, and you can get the file in front of you and prepare your answers. If a reporter walks into your office unannounced, don't feel obligated to grant an interview if you're not prepared to give one. Instead, let the reporter know that you'd be happy to schedule a time to meet. Don't let yourself get ambushed. I've seen judges get in that position before, where a reporter come up and grab and say, what do you want to talk about, and let's get a time and we'll talk about it. Always remember the rules of three when you're talking to a reporter. You cannot be able to control the length of the interview, but you want to make sure it concludes with you making your main points. So if you have at least 3 key points, it could be 1 or 2 points, but make sure you got your key points and just keep repeating them. When I was my first year on the bench, I had a controversial case involving the newspaper. And the case was over, it was never going to be appealed, and an editorial board writer called me and talked to me about it. And I told them, this is what happened, and I said, and also this, and then this, kind of gave them 2 or 3 reasons. And they said, well, surely there's other reasons too, Judge, why did you dismiss this case, or what are the other reasons? And so I kind of got sucked into it and gave them more and more reasons. So when they put my quote in the paper about what happened, well, what did they do? They took my worst reason, right? And so if I stuck with just my main reason and just keep repeating it, this is why I did it, A, B, C. Any other reason? This is why I did it, A, B, C. Any other reason, Judge? This is why I did it, A, B, C. Answer questions carefully and thoughtfully. Be concise, especially when you're on television. Do not be intimidated saying more than you want. And that's difficult because we don't deal with the media a lot, usually as a rule. But you don't want to be intimidated saying something that you don't want. When you're finished answering questions, quit talking and wait for the next question. Sometimes reporters, they'll remain quiet because they want to encourage you to kind of ramble, hoping maybe you'll say something that you won't. It's never a good idea to demand immediate coverage. Reporters resent being pushed into covering a story. You might also know too, ask the reporter when the story might appear on the print or TV, because that way you can kind of monitor and see what's being said and make sure it's correct. If you're on TV, smile, look relaxed, don't talk too fast. If you're sitting for an interview, sit near the edge of the seat, hold yourself up straight so you don't appear to be slouching. Prior to the interview, the reporter should give you directions as to where to look during the interview, either at the reporter or at the camera, depending on whether the reporter is an on-camera or off-camera interview. If you're going to be concerned about the accuracy of the report you're talking to, record it yourself. Bring a tape recorder and record it. When you're dealing with a reporter, don't let them put words in your mouth. In other words, the proverbial leading questions. Don't let a reporter ask you a question like, "What would you say, Judge?" or "Would it be fair to say?" Because then what happens when you do that, they'll use their words and then they'll directly attribute the reporter's words to you in print. And sometimes a reporter's statement contains certain loaded language and maybe give a twist that you might not have said. In other words, it's close enough that you agree with it, but it's not what you would have actually said yourself. So if you go to media, say what it is that you want to say, clearly, concisely, and don't let people put words in your mouth. If you cannot answer a question because of judicial ethic restraints, again, take the time to explain why you can't answer that question. Just don't say, "I'm not talking to you," or no comment, or "You're out of my office." Maintain your composure and keep your cool at all times. There's nothing the media loves more than getting a judge that's going to make some flippant, hostile comment, because that'll be on the social media. Always think about this too. Show your compassion as a human by acknowledging the concerns of the average viewer, and let them know that you take your job seriously in providing public service, and that you also feel the pain of those affected. It never hurts to show some humanity when you're being interviewed or when you're dealing with the media. So those are some practical points from some hard knocks that I've gotten through the years dealing with the media, but it's important. When I said the media is not your enemy, keep that in mind. The media is really an important party in our democracy, an important party and spreading the word of what the courts are doing. So that wraps up my comments, and I'm gonna be around afterwards if anybody wants to talk about some of their media horror stories. I'll be happy to commiserate with you. But thank you.
Thank you, Judge Knopf. We have our third panelist, Judge Carr.
As my presentation slides are being brought up, I think I should make a statement from the very beginning. Now, my presentation is in relation to the experience of the state courts in Singapore over the past 3 decades. By sharing our experience, I'm in no way saying that we know the right answers or that we are doing, we have the best practices or anything of that nature. What I'm basically just doing is sharing our experience and the learning points that we have managed to pick up through the years. And most of the time is through trial and error and by learning from other countries, as well as being open to trying new things. Now, let's see. Now, The objectives are, as I stated here, this is what I have to cover. And the main motivating factor has always been that everything we do in terms of public or media engagement is to instill trust and confidence in the courts. But the history in how this happened in the 1990s, or at least before 1990s, was a little bit different. It is not as if the courts were not interested in instilling public confidence and trust, but the relationship of this with public engagement and media engagement was really quite different. Now, if I can just, share a little bit what the courts are. Now, in Singapore judiciary, there are 3 different courts. We have, of course, the Supreme Court, the state courts, and the family justice courts. And they look exactly like this. These pictures are real. I mean, this is about public engagement. And this is the setup in terms of the hierarchy of the courts itself. And before 2014, the family courts used to be with the state courts, but in 2014, they were carved out to be separate, and now they are parked in this manner in the courts hierarchy. Now, coming to the state courts itself, in terms of caseload, every year we deal about 300 of 1,000 cases. That's probably small compared to the caseload in many other countries. And the point that I wish to make is that in Singapore, the state courts deal with 90% of the caseloads. And this has an impact in the way we need to engage with the media, as well as the way we need to engage with the public. Because in 90% of the time, the touch point between the public and the judiciary in Singapore takes place in the state courts. It's because of the number of cases that we deal with. Now, it deals with a whole wide spectrum of cases. Again, when you look at the spectrum of cases, the public, the court users that we have to deal with, it's a whole spectrum of them. A wide range, diverse users of the courts as well. Now I'm going to move to what happened, the history itself of what happened. Now, before 1990s, we were really not doing what we're doing now. Our attitudes towards public engagement was definitely not proactive. We were not responsive, and we were like any other public service agencies in the 1990s. There was no motivation to do that, because when you're a public institution, you see yourself as a service provider when a person needs it. You don't need to justify your existence. I'm a government body. I exist because I'm the government. So when you have that sort of a belief, the proactiveness just didn't exist. But what happened was in the 1990s, in the entire Singapore civil service, there was a change. And the public service was forced to transform itself to be what was described as to be future ready. And that didn't just involve the way the policies were crafted to cater to the citizens, not just now but in the future, but also in the service delivery as well. And because the courts are also public agencies, the courts were also forced to consider the changes and to change. And one of the changes that it focused on was the way we decided to do strategic planning. And what is relevant in this presentation is the way service delivery was considered and planned. Now, in the 2000s, again, changes took place because technology was being used in public service. So the way you manage media, the way you manage the public had to change as well, because technology had to be used. And when the moment you use technology, again, your engagement process, the methods change too. Now, in 2010 onwards, again, there was another transformation in the public service. And this transformation from the tagline tells you that the focus became the citizens. Everything that the public service agencies did, the citizens had to be in the center. Now, this had a direct impact again in the delivery of the services itself. How even the courts managed their court users, as well as how they communicated what they were doing to the public at large. Now, if you notice, that seems to be many other things happening in 2010. Now, the digital divide, the public becoming more savvy, connected, etc. I just added that in to show that right now, since the 2010, the operating environment has become much more complicated because of everything that is going on. And that is having an impact in the way we are managing our service delivery as well. Now this, I charted it according to the time period. Now if I were to look at the concepts that impacted on the way we approach service delivery and managing the media, again, the shifts in the public service which resulted in shifts in state courts, and then our citizen changing, and the citizen, the people, the society that we had in the 1990s is quite different from the society in the 2000s and now in 2010 onwards. Then the changes of the world at large too impacted the way we manage things. Technology, the way it is, and then even within technology itself, there's so many changes, and the thing is, technology is changing so fast. Investing in technology costs money, and then before you celebrate your success, and then you hear from your IT people, by the way, there's something else that's new, which is more effective. If you don't want to be outdated, you better consider this. So that it's really imposing many challenges to the way we operate. Now, the objectives that we have, technically speaking, has never changed for us. But right now, in 2010 onwards, it's quite clear what we need to do. We know where we need to access, we have to enhance access to justice, and we do it in that way. Improve service delivery, and we share information on court processes and proceeding. The bullet point number 2 has always been there, but the emphasis is we have realized in order to instill this public trust and confidence, we need to increase public awareness of what the courts are doing. Otherwise, you will lose a huge segment who don't know what you're doing. And if they come to you in time of trouble, they're not really focusing on anything. They're only interested in how to solve their problems. Now, the last one is about maintaining integrity. This is becoming a major issue because reporting of cases is also changing to a large extent because reporting of cases through the years have also changed. It's moving away from main media to new media, and that is changing the rules as well. Now, in the state courts, we don't just see service delivery as in managing the media, service delivery and managing court users. We also see another segment. Service delivery means you have to deal with your court users, people who come to your court for services, and you have to deal with the public as well. You have to do this outreach to inform the public. It is true that the public may not be interested in the courts until they have problems that they need to resolve in the courts. But instilling confidence in the judiciary, which has got such an important role in society, cannot be achieved without informing the judiciary, so that if they hear judgments, outcomes in the courts, or if any of their relative friends are involved in a matter, they would feel confident that whatever happens in the court will result in a just outcome. That is what you have to do, and that you only can do if your outreach efforts are there. Now, we have in-person service delivery, which all this was started in the 1990s. In-person means when a person comes, you deal with him in person. Now, in order to provide in-person service, to manage our court users, several things were put together to achieve this. Now, we, of course, had a unit. We had to set up a unit to deal with media as well as public communication, set up the strategy, do the outreach. Then, of course, we had the service counters to cater to people. And, of course, we had dedicated phone lines, email accounts to deal with queries as well as for complaints. Set up a quality service manager just for the member of public to speak to or a court user to speak to. Setting up a call center so that phone calls, which was a very common way of a court user to call or a member of public to call, was actually to phone calls at the same time. And of course a centralized informational center for litigants in person. Now this became a great need because we noticed through the years that the number of litigants in persons were increasing. And they were defending themselves not even just in simple matters, but in serious criminal matters as well as family or civil matters. Now, at the same time, we focused on self-help options because there was also a need. You can't keep managing people with in-person service. We knew your resources are limited, and you need to divert people to empower them, to enable them so that they can look after themselves. So to support the in-person services, self-help options were also created, and which I believe most courts, in fact all courts have them, booklets, videos, etc. and all. Now what we've been experimenting in is creating e-books now. so that people can access reference material through Kindle, Kobo e-reader, Apple eBook, Google Playbook. So we know that the society is moving in the direction, so now we're experimenting with that. Now websites, all courts have them, and the other thing that we experimented on was the mobile app, so that you get your information on the move, you don't even need a laptop or internet access. And the one that I think all of us are grappling and trying to make our way, navigate our way very carefully is the State Court's Facebook page and a YouTube page. I'll explain later why we did not go near Twitter. Later on in my, we considered it, but we think we are not ready for it at the moment. Now, this is what our website looked like. Through the years, we have changed. From 999 was the first version, 2006 we revamped it, and the 2014 is what we have now. This is the top one is our Facebook page, and the bottom one is our YouTube page. Now, as I said, the second component is the public outreach effort. So, in reaching out to the public who have no business in the courts, we have, of course, the usual things, the annual reports. We have a newsletter, which is with the other two courts. We have work plan seminars to announce our initiatives. Now, that decision was made in the 1992, where it's not just enough for the courts to introduce initiatives, but it's also important for the public to know what the court is doing to improve itself, to serve the people. And that is all linked back to the need to maintain integrity and to instill confidence. An innovating court, a court that creates better services and is trying to improve yourself, we believe instills confidence in the society. Now we have free court tours, public talks, seminars, workshops. The workshops are mainly for students to come and spend a day to learn about different topics of different legal topics, as well as to act for a short while, that they are judges and lawyers, to understand what the legal process is. Now, we also, on occasions, work with our television companies to introduce legal information in the television programs, which are very popular among a certain segment of the society, so that they can understand. And usually they are community-based issues, like, if you have problems with your neighbors, you should go for mediation, and then when you go to court, those sort of important educational messages are embedded in the television programs. And the last one, we use court surveys to obtain feedback, not just on how they feel about the courts, but also how they perceive certain services, either from their own experience or experience from their friends, so that we can take that feedback and improve. At the same time, the members of the public and the court users know they are being consulted. Now, coming to the media. Now, before 1990s, our relationship with the media was very distant. The media reported, and because we have 90% of the cases in our state courts get reported regularly. And what we also realized was that the reporters had a choice of whatever they wanted to report. And I think media, being media, tends to report cases which are newsworthy. And there are a number of cases which are extremely important in terms of sentencing decisions or in terms of legal principles. They don't get reported. And therefore, the educational aspect of court cases, is often lost. And that is what it is. The other important aspect of media we realize is that since the touch point of large majority of the society is usually through media reports on cases, this is the opinion forming, the way the society would form opinions about the court will usually take place through the media stories. And therefore, if you let the media run the stories the way they wanted to, or report only cases they wanted to, there's a potential loss of opportunity, important opportunity to educate the public on important legal principles and important cases that impacts them, that principles on contract law which impacts them, they would miss out on those things. So what they did was in 1990, after the unit was set up, is to proactively engage the media. And what we've been doing through the years is that when there are cases which have educational value, we alert the media and tell them, in court so-and-so, there's this case, you may want to go and sit in and listen, and if they want to, they do, and then they report on it. And what we also do is that if they were to write to the courts and ask for certain information, like the number of cases in relation to harassment cases, how many applications have been filed, we don't just give them the numbers. We will also provide them information on the process itself, and what are the options for parties, and what are the supporting services. In other words, we are hoping that the reporter would pick up this information and would include it in the story that the reporter is running. And we have media releases on initiatives or other things which may be of interest for members of the public. And what we've also started is regular dialogues with the reporters and their editors. We agree with the earlier presenter that educating the medium, it's a little bit difficult. We tried that for a few years, but we realized that when reporters change, you really are not achieving what you want. So what we decided was that it's better to have a dialogue with the editors who for some reason seem to stay employed longer than the reporters. So if you get to the editors, maybe they will then impart the information to the reporters. But the main purpose of the dialogue was in fact to understand their problems and at the same time for us to explain our problems to them. So the issue of speed versus accuracy can be discussed and understood. The speed versus the issues, the constraints that we have and the constraints that we have can be discussed. And this is to sensitize them to the issues that the courts face. So that when we say no, they will not be too angry. Then of course, we also try to reduce our response time because speed is important to them, especially now in this current technology, the way they run the stories. And what we also started doing is to publish certain selected judgments on our online to facilitate reporting. Now this has been found to be particularly useful for high-profile matters. And apart from that, judges now in state courts are required to give a few oral grounds. They're supposed to give a short oral grounds to explain their decision at the end of a case. Apart from explaining to the parties before you why you made that decision, and later you can release your full judgment, the reporters too can hear and understand why you made a decision in a certain way. Now this oral grounds would be uploaded on the website for the reporters to access if they so wish to refer to it. So this is actually just to help them report cases in an accurate and fast manner. Now, we looked back and wondered whether we managed to achieve what we wanted to achieve, which is whether we have the confidence and we have managed to instill confidence and trust in the courts. When we did a survey in 2015, I think we got pretty good results. And this is with our courts. We did it with our court users, and we did a survey in 2015, and we try to do this survey every 3 years. Now, challenges. This has not been an easy process because through the years we did face many challenges and many issues, and we still are. In fact, some challenges are constant. Now, when it comes to motivating staff to support service-centric engagement policy, this is a constant problem. The mindset shift that we had in 2000 onwards was a very difficult one. It's very difficult to get the staff to believe that we are here to serve the court user. And that takes a lot of training programs, it takes constant reminder, it takes the management, the leaders to show the way. And this is a constant thing, because staff change, you need to train. And you have to keep the message going on. And so this I would describe as a constant problem. We even had a justice statement which has now put the concept of providing excellent service as a critical part of our job. Just to make sure that everyone knows that this is critical, serving the court users and the people is important when you are a court. Now, the other struggle that we constantly have, of course, is sufficient resources. That can be in terms of people, money, as well as infrastructure. We are always chasing the curve in relation to this. Finding the right people to do the frontline job, which is in-person service, it's very difficult. You need people with the right attitude, you need people with the right personality as well. And of course, you have to keep investing in training all the time. When people leave, then you have to hire again, then the churn just continues. It takes a stress on the training resources as well, and it also impacts the productivity of the departments which are doing the service. Now, the one about maintaining the balance to remain neutral and impartial, that is another difficult area. This is critical for us. But at the same time, when you tell, when a person comes before a staff of the court, most of the time they are hoping for legal advice from you. They say, I have this problem, what should I do? Now, this line between giving them information and giving them legal advice, it's a very difficult one to maintain. And every day is a constant problem. And the added issue is that the member of public doesn't understand that you have this issue. Because as far as they're concerned, I have a problem, you should solve me, you're a public servant. But explaining to them, it's becoming a problem, especially when the society is becoming more demanding. Now, this maintaining the balance also is an issue when you deal with the media. Because right now, I mean, in most cases when there's an error in a media report, we can tell them to correct when it's mainstream media. That's not a problem, they will correct it. When that error takes place, in any other form of media, it is very, especially when the story is misreporting or where the information is all totally wrong, the courts can never go in there and say, actually your story is not accurate, something else happened. Because we don't get involved, we don't make any extrajudicial statements, and we don't engage in public debate. But the story can take a life of its own, and the court case can turn into a drama which is totally incorrect, and yet most of the time the courts are in a way helpless. The truth is actually in the courtroom, but we can't explain because the only thing that we speak through are judgments. And people are not really very interested in reading your judgments when there is a full, multicolored story going on social media or in the forum page. Now, this is of course through the years, but especially when the criticism is in relation to a decision and sentence, etc. and everything, the concern is that through the period of time, this may start affecting the integrity of the courts when you cannot step in to correct the wrong. Now, the other added problem is that whenever you have this comments, very, very bad comments going on about an ongoing case, we know that that may not affect the judges, but it may affect witnesses who may be coming up to testify in a case. The comments may be so bad that they may frighten away a witness, or it may force a witness to alter the evidence. And that again is becoming a concern, because how do you stop bad chatter on social media that may be taking place, which may be affecting ongoing cases? Now, this recently in one of the cases in Singapore, there was a rape case that was going on, which is widely reported. And the discussion that was going on online about the victim itself became so bad, it was so bad, that the judge at the end of the case, in fact, made a statement in a courtroom where he criticized the netizens and basically warned them. He in fact basically said, he expressed his concern that this has the potential of causing harm to the judicial process. It is also not respectful towards the judicial process itself. So this is the first time a judge actually publicly made a statement about what was going on, because the chatter that was going on online was really quite bad. Now, the other one is about managing different segments of a court users. This has an impact on our resources, because when you talk about dealing with the public and the court users, you're dealing with a whole diverse range. So you've got to train people to deal with these different types of court users as well as members of public. You also have to train them to deal with prosecutors, with media, with court users, with their family members, etc. And what is happening right now is that you don't just have to train our people, we don't just have to train them to deal with court users. We realize that even though we are investing in IT, and we think that's the way to go, a huge segment of our court users, in fact, are not comfortable in using IT. So what that is forcing us to do is we have to invest in in-person services, which is expensive. Then we have to invest in IT services, which is expensive, because we have both segments needing our services. So that is an added challenge. We can't make a decision like we did with our case management system, where we say we're going to go E, and that's the way we're going to go, and everybody is going to move that way. But when it comes to engaging court users and public, that is not such an easy decision to make. You may have to provide both types of services in order to manage them all. Now, then we also notice that we have a whole variety of people who have personality, psychological problems. Even managing them is becoming an issue, because you can't train your people to deal with them in every situation. And of course, then we have the special class of vexatious and abusive court users, which are a class of their own, because not only are they difficult to manage, the amount of resources we spend in managing them is totally disproportionate to the individual, and that is really a problem. Now, if I can move to managing social media very quickly, because they told me to wrap up and I will. We only chose Facebook and YouTube because Facebook allowed us to put up our information without compromising on accuracy and the messages that we wanted to put out. We felt that using 14 characters to explain a complex legal process was something that it's difficult to do, and it may in fact confuse people rather than help them. But even Facebook, every time we put up something on Facebook, we have to satisfy the platform custom and rules. And that forces us to summarize the information that we give people, and sometimes we break up to posts. The concern is that when you break it up, people's attention spans are very, very short. They may not return the next day to read the rest of it. And so they may just get part 1 and not get part 2, 3, and 4, and that may not be good for them too. So that's why our engagement on Facebook has been limited, and we know it's not had much impact for us. But we don't think we at the moment are ready to be interactive. And also, I think the other reason is because we don't think we have the skill sets to interact with netizens on Facebook in an effective manner, especially if the comments become quite negative. And YouTube, of course, is just videos, and we have made them smaller so that people can watch them the way they watch them. And lastly, about the case on cases by new media. This is becoming a big worry for us because we find that in the new media, where people they do their own reporting and they disseminate on their own, sometimes it's full of misinformation or it's full of opinions. And when they misinform, we can't stop them. We can't have a press conference and correct them. And we don't even know who to engage, first of all, because in the web, how do you monitor and how do you contact and how do you get anyone to correct the wrong? But because a large segment of society is using new media to find out about information and news, this seems to be quite an important area of concern. But at this moment, we don't have an answer to this. And I think this is an area of concern for us. Now, the other part I just wanted to highlight to you all is that we don't even know what the members of public want. One survey told us that newspapers are not the way to go. People want to get their news through mobile apps, etc. Another survey came, 50% wanted it in newspapers. So again, we don't even know whether we are doing the right thing because surveys don't tell us the whole story half the time. Now, so moving forward, we know we have a lot to do. And we have to keep finding new ways. We have to find our way and make sure, just because we know that we need to remain relevant, and that is to ensure access to justice to our court users and for members of the public. That's all. Thank you.
As promised, I will be brief. Okay. I'm quite gratified to hear the three panelists talk about the same challenges, problems, issues facing us in the Philippines. And I wanted to just present from our side, the Philippine side, what judges encounter. Media, of course, is something that we cannot, escape from. It's become very pervasive. The various forms of media have gone beyond paper, have gone beyond ink and sound. The increasing access and reliance on the internet has made social media a fact of life, on many occasions, an occupational hazard. Many traditional, meaning print, TV, radio, journalists are actually relying on social media to get their stories. Many get their tips from social media, and of course, if the tips are wrong, then they end up with the wrong story. Now, in the Philippine context, these are some of the key players in judicial communications. Of course, I speak from the point of view of the Supreme Court of the Philippines, so we have one Supreme Court, 15 justices led by the Chief Justice. The Supreme Court is the only court in the country with a public information office. Of course, we have third-level courts. We have the Court of Appeals, we have the Sandigan Bayan, which is which is a graft and corruption court, and the third is a court of tax appeals. And then we have regional trial courts, which are courts of the second level. These are trial courts of general jurisdiction, but there are also trial courts of specialized jurisdiction. And then we have the first level courts, the municipal trial courts, metropolitan trial courts in cities. Again, courts of general jurisdiction. And I think, as with Singapore, most of the dockets are found in the first and second level courts, although they do tend to make their way up to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. The Court of Tax Appeals is a very specialized court. It deals with, as the name tells us, appeals from tax cases. And then, of course, the Sandigan Bayan is, again, a specialized trial court. It is a trial court that handles graft and corruption cases. Some of you may have met some of the reporters who were here during our opening ceremony. They're composed of at least 25 regular journalists and a revolving pool of about 10 to 15 relievers covering print, radio, television, and online platforms. They call themselves the Justice Beat because they cover the Supreme Court, the Department of Justice, and the Court of Appeals, which are found in the same compound. There is no specialized beat covering the first level and the second level courts for the simple reason that these first and second level courts are nationwide. So they tend to be general reporters, and that poses some difficulty because these reporters may not really know how to cover courts. And so we've tried to address that, but not with much success. Netizens on Twitter and Facebook, on blogs, some publishing under real names, others only with avatars and pseudonyms. There have been parody accounts that have been opened on Twitter involving justices of the Supreme Court. To my knowledge, only 2 justices of the Supreme Court keep an active Twitter account, which they themselves manage. That's Justice Carpio and Justice Leonen. There are parody accounts that you'll find of Supreme Court justices on Twitter. They are not real. They're not the justices who are operating them. Of course, reading, viewing, and listening public on traditional media, which is television, radio, and print. And the Public Information Office is the one that deals with all of these. Okay? The office was created in 1998 to help carry out the vision of a trustworthy and credible judiciary. The chief task as an office is to disseminate as promptly, as widely as possible, news about the Supreme Court, its decisions, and provide the public with judicial information in a manner that the general public can easily comprehend. Our primary objective is to bring the court closer to the people by helping them understand what the court actually said in its decisions. And I think that's a continuing refrain. The PIO was imagined primarily as a news provider for the court and also partly and secondarily as a public relations group. The first PIO chief was a retired airline executive who had a flair for the written word, was quite plain spoken. The second PIO chief was here earlier. Court Administrator Midas Marquez. Younger, more photogenic, media savvy. There have only been 3 PIO chiefs. I'm the third. The primary tool used by the PIO at that time, 1998, was organized was the press release and the weekly news briefing. The weekly news briefing happens on a Tuesday, which is when the court meets and back as 15 justices. While these are still being done now, we have gone online. We've been using more online tools, more social media tools. We have a very active Twitter account. We started the practice of uploading audio recordings of oral arguments in January 2013. Since then, we've also live streamed the audio component of oral arguments, which expanded the access to the court. Because we have a small session hall which can accommodate less than 200 people, and it's only found in Metro Manila, in the city of Manila. Sometimes people want to be able to hear the court and see the court. So what we've done is we've asked permission from the court to live stream the audio. It's like listening to it on live radio. The court has not allowed us to live stream the video yet. They do not want to be seen. They want to be heard. So, but now people can now access the audio live stream. One of the things that we do is to address the needs of our different publics. And we've identified some of them, well, all of them. We deal with the legal academia. These are law students, law professors, law schools. We deal with the bench and the bar, of course. We deal with the media as an institution. We deal with litigants. And then we deal with the general public, those who don't have cases, but those who like to read about the courts and the drama, the color that goes on with the courts. And of course, with each public, we have different ways of addressing their needs. For example, we can use more technical language for legal academia because we understand each other. We're all lawyers. But we can't, and we can do that as well for the bench and the bar. But we can't do that for media, we can't do that for the litigants, we can't do that for the general public. So we tend to take we tend to use a less technical approach when talking to the media, when talking to litigants, when talking to the general public. Some of the tools we use, this is from the website. Whenever we have an oral argument, we put something like this on site. We put up a microsite. We put all the pleadings there so they can read the pleadings, and then we upload the recordings so that they can hear about it. They can put it on their iPod and they can listen to it while they're jogging. They can download the transcripts and they can catch the live stream. And then on the other hand, that's a screenshot of the Twitter account of the PIO. And while we realize that Twitter only has 140 words, well, it's now 280. It was double, I think only yesterday. It's now 280 characters. It's really not enough to explain a complex and a nuanced decision. What we do is we just use Twitter to push traffic towards the website. So Twitter is faster. People look at Twitter in order to get urgent or news flashes. So what we do is we use Twitter to do that. But we use Twitter to drive the link to the website. Just a snapshot of some of the things that are on social media. We are not on Pinterest, we are not on Facebook, we are on Twitter. We don't have an Instagram account yet, we don't use Google+, we don't use LinkedIn. The reason why we don't use Facebook, although it allows us to use more space, the problem with Facebook is of course also the instant comments. You can't stop the trolls, you can't stop the commenters, and so it takes a long time for us to be able to go through all the messages. And sometimes the main message you want to drive through will get lost because of all the comments and all the drama that goes on in Facebook. So we made the decision, we won't go to Facebook yet until we can figure out how to drive the message clearly without people showing up with all the drama. So right now we're using Twitter only for urgent announcements to drive traffic to the website. It's also useful for us to announce, typhoon warnings, work suspensions, and all of those things. So we have a pretty big Twitter population following us. Okay, some general principles here that we've encountered. There is an unavoidable tension between media and the courts. Courts want to exercise judicial independence. The media insists on freedoms of information, expression, and the press. They will always assert this. They have a right to know as agents of the people. But as far as the court is concerned, sometimes the courts, particularly the trial courts, would insist on protecting the rights to due process and a fair trial, particularly if it involves a criminal case, and particularly sensational criminal cases. So there's the balancing that Judge Knock was talking about earlier. Of course, there's also the tension between transparency and access and in relation to privilege, deliberative privilege of the courts. Media will always say, you have to be absolutely transparent, we have to have access to all of these documents, but at the same time, the courts will safeguard judicial independence by saying, you cannot have access to every document that is in my record. And in fact, the Supreme Court has made a ruling on that says, anything that is pre-decisional and deliberative is privileged. You cannot get copies of the drafts of the decision, you cannot get copies of the notes of the justices, you cannot get copies of the research. You can get copies of the actual decision that's promulgated, because then that becomes part of the public domain. But before that, until the justice or the judge decides, you can't get copies of that. Why? Because they would tend, if these were reported, they would tend to limit the discretion of the judge. This would tend to limit the thinking of the judge. It would be very easy to say that the judge suddenly made a turnaround. After coming up with a first draft saying, I'm going this way, the judge finally decides to go the other way. The media will report it and say, well, the judge made an abrupt and surprising turnaround. Was there something behind that turnaround? It's always very easy to paint that kind of decision. In order to insulate the judges and the courts from that kind of thinking, The court has ruled, no, we will not allow pre-decisional and deliberative documents to be accessed. Thereafter, once those documents and those deliberations are included in the decision, then they become part of the decision, they become part of the public domain. Of course, there's always the balancing because one cannot be supreme over the other. It's not the court wins this round, the media wins the next round. Okay, it's always a balancing. The court's trying to figure out what to do every time the media makes a request. Now, typical requests that we get: copies, decisions, orders, and resolutions. That's easy because once they're out, they're promulgated, we can give them copies. But until they're promulgated, we cannot give them copies. We cannot give them copies of drafts. We can't give them copies of deliberation documents. Court records and transcripts. Transcripts of hearings before the first level and second level trial courts. These are usually accessed by lawyers after paying for them. But the usual request of the media is, can we have a copy of the transcript for free? And that's where it always, that's where we always have some conflict because the courts will say, we can't give it to you for free because, even the lawyers are paying for the transcripts. Court records, again, subject to privilege. There are some documents that cannot be released to the media until the decision comes out. Financial documents, statements of net worth of justices and judges, they always like to see and compare how rich or how poor the judges or justices are or have become across the years. They make a game of it. Every year they try to track the richest, the poorest, the one with the greatest increase, the one with the greatest decrease. So we've agreed, the court has agreed to release a summary of their financial documents on the website. We've also come up with a transparency page where all the financial documents of the courts are there. All biddings, all procurements, all expenditures, all expenses are uploaded to the website. So we always tell the media, you want to find out how much money the court has, how much we've spent, go to the transparency page on the Supreme Court website, you can see that there. Request for interview and or comment, and that's where it always gets tricky. They always ask me, can you comment on this? Now, the policy that we've come up with is that I will not comment on anything that the court has not decided. Until the court decides, I can't say anything. I've told the media that many times, they know that, but of course you cannot stop them from trying. And they will try many different ways to get me to comment. And so, like Judge Nuff mentioned earlier, I try to avoid a no comment because, a no comment is bad for you, reputationally. So I always tell them, can I just answer that with a smile? So, but they say, well, but we can't catch that on print, sir. So I have to try to figure out a way to answer it and say why I cannot say anything. Of course, I address those things off the record. Off the record, I will tell them certain things, I will point them in a certain direction, but I will generally do not agree to give a comment on something that the court has not decided. Comments on political statements, very common. How do you react to the statement of the president? How do you react to this and that? How do you react to surveys, etc., etc.? We usually don't comment on that. Request for interview of specific justices, the Chief Justice or any of the 14 justices, it depends on them if they agree. Many times we would field requests for interview for the justices and they would say, why don't you take that then? Why don't you tell the media, you interview me? But then I will always ask, what do you want me to say? Well, then they would say, it's up to you. So it always goes back to, okay, what can I say? There's nothing else for me to say except to say no comment if it's not a decision. Request for live coverage. We've adopted the one camera approach to trials. One camera inside the courtroom. There's a pool coverage. People tap into that camera, and the rule there is that there is no panning. The camera is focused on the judge only, and this usually happens during promulgation of judgment. There is no live coverage of trial proceedings in the lower courts. There is no live coverage of Supreme Court proceedings as well. Only the live streaming of the audio. Confirmation requests. This is where it also gets tricky. What they try to do is try to confirm something they've heard through unofficial sources. They'll say, sir, we've heard that this was decided by the court. Can you confirm? Okay, and usually their leaks are pretty good. They usually have pretty good sources. So I would usually, if it cannot be denied, I would usually just say that it is from a source who is not authorized to say anything. Okay? So, the conflict, the court's decision should speak for themselves. The role of the BIO is to simply announce a decision, allow it to be the text. Notably, however, our mandate is to disseminate news about the court and its decisions. We do not give opinions, speculations, or answer hypotheticals. We do not engage in political controversies. Our end goal is to ensure and maintain judicial independence. That is the singular grace of being ungrateful to the appointing power. Unfortunately, press briefings of the court decisions are invariably boring and dry because of that. They will look for drama. I am the worst person to ask because I'm usually very straightforward with them. I tell them, if you want drama, don't look at me. Okay? Unfortunately, court decisions are not made for the sound bites and for the 280 characters of Twitter that dominate today's exchanges. And I think one of the things that I've learned experientially is this. Much of the difficulty that we have faced from the media has been the characterization of the court as a news source and not an information source. It is a subtle and nuanced difference, but it is a difference nonetheless. Well, I always tell the media, don't look at us as a news source, look at us as an information source. I will point you to a decision, I will point you to an article, make a story on that. Don't give me a soundbite, don't make the court a soundbite. Come up with an article, come out with research, come out with an in-depth coverage of this particular issue, then that will help us. But don't reduce us to a 3-second or 4-second soundbite. But then it always boils down to, they'll say, sir, scarce resources, sir, we're being outscooped by the other networks, sir, we need it fast, we need it now, we need it yesterday. So that's always the source of conflict there. So I promise I'll be brief. I think I extended by a few minutes. So I just wanted to introduce to you what we're doing, and I'll be happy to take some questions as well together with the other members of the panel. We've extended a little bit, so maybe we can have a few minutes to ask questions. If you have questions, please, yes, raise your, are there microphones, please? Microphones, and maybe the panel can also answer from there, so please give the panel microphones. Please introduce yourself together with the institution you represent. We'll limit ourselves first to 2 questions so that there can be more questions that can be asked. Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so very much. It's been a very, very interesting session altogether from A to Z. Very educative. Having said that, my name is Huma Chuftai and I'm Director of Programs with the Federal Judicial Academy in Islamabad, Pakistan. We have a very vibrant media, very, very vibrant, and we have about 70 private channels. And we have a lot of, I think, immaturity. The media is not mature enough. Having said that, I will be very quick with my question. From all of you, I mean, I request responses from each one of you. Probably one of you might have responded to that earlier. Do you, since you have got into this media strategy that you have for your respective courts or countries, did you take up any initiatives in terms of in training or, I get away with that word, orientation of the judiciary as well as the media vis-a-vis each other as to how they need to be responsive towards each other's needs? Because that is very important. We feel that, and that was pointed out earlier, that there has to be an education for judiciary about what media entails, and media needs to understand the judicial processes and procedures and how they need to respect that and then report. So this is how I see. So have you done such measures before you open up your respective courts towards the media?
No. That was my point earlier about it's a topic that we don't talk about as judges.
Yes. Okay. I think I actually covered that during my presentation, so no further comment at this stage.
I think we know that training judges, we never really trained the judges to deal with the media because we felt that the judges should not be speaking to the media. But what the judges were trained to understand was the media, when media makes a request, they need to produce the information quick enough to respond to media. So it was just informing them about the needs of the media requests. But we had a spokesman instead to manage the media directly. That spokesperson had to be trained to deal with the person. And subsequently, the management of the state courts started this dialogue series to understand the media and to encourage the media to understand the courts. We tried this training process where we gave a lot of information to the media, as I explained, but we found that you can't run this program every year because different people get into the reporting business every year. So that's why we stopped the training program, and now we are concentrating on communicating with the editors instead to pass the information.
And the spokesperson was not a judicial officer, right?
No, the spokesperson is a comms trained person trained to deal with media.
For the lower courts, we don't have a spokesperson, but we do give, through the Philippine Judicial Academy, some form of media training for executive judges. Executive judges would be like the de facto coordinator for all of the lower courts, because it may happen that they may need to respond to some media queries, so we want to equip them to some extent, but it's really not enough. We really cannot equip them enough in so short a time. For the Supreme Court, I handle the communications and the messaging part. Thank you. Other questions, please? So thank you very much. We will have a closing dinner at 6:30 at the main hall. Thank you very much for your attention.